Trinn Hatch, welcome to the show. How are you this morning?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, Elliot. It's wonderful to be here.
Pleasure is truly mine. I'm excited to dive into your area of expertise today. As I was just telling you offline, it's not something we've gone through a great deal on this podcast, so I'm sure you're going to open a lot of minds today and pique a lot of curiosity. So before we do dive into that in a very deep way, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. My name is Trinn Hatch. I'm the co-creator of a company called Jampha Tibetan Pharmacy, and we make Tibetan medicine based on a lineage that's more than 2,500 years old. We work closely with a group of Tibetan amchis, and amchi is a title for a Tibetan physician, and they've had more than 50 years of formulation experience. And so we bring to life ancient and traditional botanical and mineral medicines, and we also advance and increase their expression by using the insights and the advances of modern science to help increase and establish the expression of botanical and mineral medicine in an even more profound way.
So listening to that, it sounds probably quite a esoteric concept to many who've maybe not come across this world before. What made you head in that direction?
Wait, that's a little bit of a long story, but I'll keep it short. Basically, I was living a very different life. I was working in private security, and one day while I was off duty, I was assaulted and broke my leg. And what happened after that was 3 surgeries to keep my leg. The doctors wanted to amputate it. They didn't think they could save it. And I ended up with external fixation, in a bed for 3 or 4 months with my parents taking care of my wounds just to be able to keep my leg. And I went through cellulitis infections and staph infections and all kinds of really rough things to go through, but I made it through, and the result was a leg that was very badly damaged and a body that had been really traumatized, and I ended up on about 20 different medications, and my doctors couldn't see a way for me to be able to work anymore, so they put me on a disability, and my life just became the opposite of what it had been, which was full of action and activity and really using my physical attributes to do my job, and I was no longer able to do that. And so about 5 years after living like that, I really hit rock bottom, and I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I started looking for answers outside of Western medicine, which I just become very disillusioned with. I was working with 3 or 4 specialists, surgeons, my general practitioner, and it seemed like none of them communicated with each other. They'd all put me on different medications, and it just wasn't helping me to heal. It was really just band-aiding the symptoms and helping me maybe feel better a little bit here and there, but not really. And so I started looking for other answers. I prayed for guidance, and within a few weeks I found cannabinoids and CBD specifically, and I started using that to wean myself off of the pharmaceuticals. And over the course of 2 years I was able to do that, and came off all of those pharmaceuticals. But still, even though I was able to get through life and back to work and take myself off of disability, there were still things that just weren't able to regenerate, things that weren't restoring back to their original balanced state before I was injured. And that's when we went looking for more answers, and eventually would find our Tibetan physician who opened our eyes to the botanical and mineral kingdoms that we could incorporate into what we were doing with CBD and terpenes, and we really began an expression of Tibetan medicine.
Wow, yeah, it's one hell of a story, and I always say countless times on this podcast as well, the best people to talk about their area of expertise are those who have gone down into the deep end of exploring that themselves, and often, usually the answers and the things that they promote on a day-to-day basis come from the answers that they were searching for. So it's amazing that you've been able to do a little bit of that. And where did you come across this Tibetan physician, and obviously combine it with the work that you were doing with CBD already? It's like the stars all aligned. I know you said you prayed for guidance and you prayed for the path, and it seems like it kind of laid itself out to you. Obviously you have to be aware and be able to take those signs, but at the same time it seems like a lot aligned for you to find yourself in that specific path.
Yeah, I think again it was a matter of looking for more information, for more guidance, and I actually had decided to go and do a herbology, botanical pharmacology course, and get a PhD so I could understand the botanical kingdoms. And my wife said, "You're already not home enough as it is. How are you going to have time for us and for that as well?" And I said, "I'll have to get up earlier." She said, "You already get up at 4 a.m.?" And I thought, well, I guess I could look at other options, but what are the other options? And so we decided to make a call to the universe and ask for assistance, ask for somebody who understood the botanical and mineral kingdoms and could help us to establish that connection with what we were doing with CBD and terpenes. And it took less than 2 weeks, and a Tibetan physician contacted my wife on LinkedIn and began a conversation that's continued to this day. It's been over 4 years now since we met. Amchi Tubdan Lekshi actually showed up at our facility and wanted to learn what we were doing about terpenes, and started to explore different avenues of wisdom and knowledge that we hadn't experienced yet with us. And during that experience, we really built an affinity, and over the course of the next year, decided to bring our companies together. And so now we have Jampha and Tibetan Pharmacy, and Jampha is what my wife and I had created to begin with, and Tibetan Pharmacy is what Amchi has established over the last 50 years in the U.S. And so we now have brought those two companies together, and they are now called Jampha Tibetan Pharmacy.
Amazing. So basically, combine the best of both worlds. You saw everything that was going on and was going well for you, and obviously wanted to spread that far and wide into the world as well. So talk to me about when you go to see a Tibetan medicine practitioner compared to seeing your typical doctor. What do those both look like from a consultation perspective, right? Is there any grand difference between them, or is it more about the treatment?
Yeah, there's a huge difference. Traditional Tibetan medicine uses tongue diagnostics, where they're able to map out the organs, depletions in the organs, able to see what your dosha type is, your body type. There's a very, very different analytical process that goes into defining what's imbalanced and what needs to be supported. Tibetan medicine focuses on addressing the causes, the key issues, the foundational imbalances that are causing the disease or illness, and helping to bring those back into balance, which of course helps to deal with the symptoms and also the root cause of the problems. Whereas, as my experience has been with allopathic or Western medicine, very much they treat the symptoms. When I had a certain type of pain, nerve pain, they'd give me one pill, and it was a different type of pain to that. It was another pill, and it would just continually stack up what we were using, and continue to add more things to try to maintain that balance or perceived balance. But Tibetan medicine gives the body the foundational elemental support that it needs to be able to regenerate and heal itself. And that's really the difference between Western or allopathic medicine and Eastern medicine, is the focus on the connection between the mind, the body, and the spirit in healing. And, in my own experience, I wasn't able to find and to achieve the healing that I was seeking and searching for until I addressed things on a mind, body, and spirit level. And that's something that Amchi La has really opened our eyes to and helped us to understand that a lot of the sicknesses that we experience on a physical basis are actually manifestations of traumas or emotional things that we've experienced or different experiences we've had in our life physically, that make our space kind of ripe for illness and disease. And so by removing those conditions and supporting the body, we're able to awaken the body's innate healing systems and rely on those rather than somebody practicing medicine and trying to find the right balance of chemicals for us to feel better. Our body can provide that balance of chemicals just by the food we eat and the different nutritional supplements, botanical and mineral medicines that we take into our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fascinating concept. And in terms of the measurable aspect, obviously, like you said, you're kind of looking to get things into a balance, right? Not a perceived balance. How do you measure the progress or what needs to be fixed? Because obviously, if you go and see a doctor from a Western medicine perspective, it's all about checking your blood work and seeing what you're maybe deficient or insufficient in, or it's based on symptoms as well, right? Many things from a mental health perspective are based more on symptoms and what we believe to be is happening versus anything like they don't do a measurement on the brain or anything along those lines. How is that measured when it comes to the Tibetan medicine world? Do they look at blood work? Do they go based on your symptoms? How do you measure progress? Is it all kind of based on what you're feeling?
It can all most of what you just said can be done just through tongue diagnostics. So our Tibetan physician, he uses tongue diagnostics for all of his patients. Generally, you'll take an image of your tongue from different angles first thing in the morning before you've drank or eaten anything. And that gives an indication to things like which organs are depleted, which organs are in a disease state, whether the body is running too hot or too cold, whether the doses are balanced. There's many aspects of tongue diagnostics that I'm just starting to learn for myself. But it's very profound. Every part of the tongue corresponds to a different organ in the body. And so when we see depletion or imbalance in one of those systems, we can offer support to bring them back into balance, which usually corrects the issue on a foundational level, on a causal level, for what's causing the illness. For chronic diseases, I haven't found anything better than Tibetan medicine to help to manage them, both the symptoms and remediate and regenerate and restore where possible. We spend a lot of time just educating our customers on the different formulas that we have and the different Tibetan pill medicines so that they can make wise and educated decisions on what's best for their health. It's really a safe and a very, very comprehensive system of healing that seeks to support and regenerate and restore different body systems with the different formulations, but also bring your body back into a sense of vitality and increased energy. And for me, that's been a huge part of my experience with Tibetan medicine. I'd gone through a large part of my healing process before I met our Tibetan physician, but since meeting him, we've created many formulas together, and some of them have, even been for myself and my family members. One of the things that was the hardest when I went through my recovery was PTSD. It's this thing people talk about, and until you experience it, you just don't really understand what it is, but it can be crippling. It just stops you seeks to stop you from your family relationships, from your work, from everything that made you happy before, and it's like a shadow that follows you around, and it's very hard to get rid of. And I was feeling that at a point about a year ago. I spent a lot of my days doing consultations with people and speaking to terminally ill and very sick people, and it was affecting me, and my heart especially was weighing it down. And I was taking some of those things on, and I let Amchila know that during one of our meetings, and he very pointedly looked up and said, we need to make something for the heart to support the heart. And then went on to explain to me that when sometimes we're helping people and they're unable to find that full path to healing, that it can be a block or a trauma or some emotions that become trapped within the neural network of our heart. And our hearts have a neural network, for those that don't know. It's actually larger than our brain. And emotions and traumas can become stagnant and trapped there. And so he created a formula called Healing Heart, and that took my PTSD away. It just, over the course of 3 months, it dissolved. Something that recently would have regularly triggered me for my PTSD, it happened, and there was no trigger. I was aware that the experience was going on, but there was no emotion attached to it, and I thought, wow, this has really come full circle now. I've experienced the depths of what PTSD can be for somebody, and now I've experienced what it's like coming out of that and not having that shadow weighing down on me. And it's been an amazing, enlightening, and awakening experience for me, and it's become one of our most popular formulas because I think many of us have things that become trapped within our hearts that we need to process and dissolve and move on and make space for more beautiful things and more wonderful experiences to remember and to store there within that neural network.
And is there anything that we can kind of hang our hats on in the sense of what's literally going on? Because there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who like the idea of science and evidence to back up these things so that they can contextualize it a little bit more, so they can understand it a little bit more. So is there any of that, or is that kind of missing the point? Is there supposed to be a level of not looking too deeply into the science in order for this to help with your healing?
I mean, the science is absolutely there. Tibetan medicine, the practice or the healing science of Suwa Rigpa, has been a lineage for more than 2,500 years. It's one of the oldest lineages on the earth. And what that means is that an unbroken chain of Tibetan Lama physicians and Amchi physicians have passed down their wisdom and knowledge and their applied insight into the botanical and mineral kingdoms for all of that time. And so they have their own research that's been done, more research than has probably been done by any other lineage into botanical medicine. In the 8th century, the lead Tibetan physician at the time, he actually brought all of the healers and all of the scientists, all of the the different experts in ethnobotanical practices from all over the world and held a conference and put together all of the information that was available on the botanicals and minerals that were being used for medicine, and built a compendium and started a very organized structure for Suarigba, and that structure has continued until today.
And if it's such a well-researched and understood concept for those who know, why hasn't it made its way into the modern world in such a emphatic way? Obviously, this is the first conversation we're having about it on this podcast. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the word is esoteric when we start to think about these types of things. And I think people have heard of, TCM, for example, they've heard of Ayurveda approaches and everything along those lines, but it's not so commonly practiced. It's not so integrated into society. Do you think that there's going to be a possibility of making that happen, or what do you think the missing link is at this moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, the missing link really has been suppression. It's very different what we do to allopathic medicine. I work with people on a regular basis where we spend 3 months working together, and they never have to call or use our products again. They've established a healing trajectory. They've begun their healing process, and they can continue that oftentimes after using our products just by good lifestyle choices, eating the right foods, drinking enough water, getting enough rest. And so we make sure that people have the opportunity to use the products in a way that they don't have to continue being beholden to taking something for the rest of their life. It can be different for some chronic conditions, but that's not a good business model. When we look at the way we do business, we're not a revolving door. So 70% of the people who use our products don't have to continue using them, and so we're constantly building new relationships with new customers and new physicians because we help people, they move on, and we have space now to help more people. And that doesn't really work with the Western paradigm for business or medicine. It keeps medicine and medical practitioners in business having sick patients. But, I think people are seeing the difference. There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on within the medical industries and different viruses and different things that are happening in the world, and people are really starting to question what they're putting into their bodies. And when they ask that question seriously and look at the facts and the information, what they'll find is that botanical and mineral medicine is very safe. It doesn't cause interactions. It doesn't hurt people. Allopathic medicine, there's a lot of interactions that can go with the medicine. But what we find is in using this specific system of healing that we haven't found any interactions in the past almost 5 years with pharmaceuticals. I don't get calls from physicians that use our products and say, hey, could this have caused this? Or calls from customers saying, could this have caused this problem? It's usually the other way around. The formulas will actually help and support the function of Western pharmaceuticals, and oftentimes will help to stave off those potential contradictions and interactions that can happen with Western medicine.
And when I was doing my research beforehand, I obviously looked into some criticisms, obviously, on traditional Chinese medicine to get an understanding of, what are some of the potential pitfalls and potential things that people discuss. And there's a lot of discussion around the presence of heavy metals within some of the herbs that are utilized within this type of medicine. Is there anything you have to say regarding that criticism?
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons why Ayurvedic medicines have been outlawed in the U.S. for a long time. I've spoken to the Ayurvedic community at length about this, and they've had a hard time getting their botanicals into the country. Ours have been tested. We don't have any issues with importing them. The basic premise of Tibetan medicine is to do no harm. And so to give you an example, we make a formula that has shilajit in there. Shilajit is a mineral substance that's found high in the Himalayas. It's a bioaccumulation of 85 different minerals, fulvic and humic acid, and that has been known to be tainted with heavy metals. For the past 10 years, I've seen reports of that, and it's true that when you harvest shilajit in impure areas and don't put it through its purification process, then yes, it will have heavy metals and it can be dangerous. But that's the beauty of Suarigpa, the specific lineage that we adhere to, is it has processes for purifying and removing those toxic elements and heavy metal elements from the base botanicals and minerals that we use in our formulations, so they're as clean and as pure as possible. We also test our products. We put them through COAs. We test them for heavy metals and pesticides to make sure that there's no unsafe levels. But that was a concern of mine when I began, and one that came up quite a bit. And so we made sure that we did our testing and looked at all of the sources of where our ingredients are coming from. And thankfully, our Tibetan physician has been sourcing these botanicals and minerals for the last 50 years from the medical monasteries and other contacts directly. And he's very aware of this, and we do everything we can to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation regarding ingredients and sourcing them, because I remember speaking to a owner of a CBD infused coffee company, and he was talking to me about the whole process of sourcing CBD, sourcing the coffee to begin with, actually, as well, to just make sure that everything is as high quality as possible. And he mentioned that process was very, very extensive, not the easiest whatsoever. So how do you go about making sure that you have access to these ingredients on such a regular basis? Because obviously when something is created in a laboratory and there's an unlimited amount of resources to a degree to create that type of thing, and that's why we see painkillers and all these other things on our shelves constantly, time after time, because of nothing's necessarily being sourced from the earth, right? It's all being kind of manufactured and man-made. But when it comes to all the ingredients that you have to source that are essentially coming from the earth, how do you ensure that you maintain the level of consistency within the products in terms of the quantity as well? Because that must be a challenge in terms of making sure that you can source high quality at relatively high quantity. Is that kind of a potential pitfall as well for this being applied to the masses as well, the ability to continue extracting the high quality ingredients?
Yes, our Tibetan physician, Amchila, he made it clear that one of the reasons why Tibetan medicine hasn't been available on a large scale is because the cultivation areas weren't equipped to be able to deal with a huge amount of harvesting. And so he actually, about 40 years ago, began an institute called the Tanaduk Institute, which went throughout the Himalayas with the Dalai Lama's blessing, and basically built propagation areas for them to grow these rare and precious botanicals and to keep that growth growing, so that there would be increased availability of these botanicals and minerals. And so they've been doing that for decades, and only just recently in the past 5 years has it come to a point where there's enough of a rotation of the rare and precious botanicals that we use where we can be confident that we can have the supply that we need while also maintaining preservation of those areas. And so we keep very sacred and precious some of these botanicals and minerals that we use, because they're only available in certain places in the world and are very rare. But that's what our physician spends a lot of his time doing, is cultivating and making sure those relationships stay vibrant and open with our suppliers and the monasteries that we work with, and keeping a steady source of those botanicals coming. But it can be challenging. You're absolutely right. And so we're always looking for ways to increase the amount of the different types of botanicals that are available to us, and setting up new cultivars with new herbs and botanicals that can be grown, so that we can increase the quantity and the suppliers for each of the botanicals in case one doesn't have it available. And so it's really building a foundation of our supply chains that we've done over the past 5 years that makes it possible for us to keep in inventory and stocked all of our formulas.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept. And obviously, when it comes to things that, like you even called them rare and precious don't necessarily, not necessarily a synonym of like high quantity, right? We don't find a lot of those things. So to preserve the quality and to kind of provide that as much as possible sounds like a real challenge. And is that like the long-term goal? Obviously, I'm sure that this mission even spans beyond your lifetime, but thinking about where this could be in 100 years time or so, how do you think the world can look with a balance of a Western and an Eastern approach? Or is the goal to kind of let the Eastern take over versus the Western? Like, what's the bigger picture mission? Obviously to help as many people as possible, but when you look into like an ideal case scenario, what do you see that being?
Honestly, I see it as a marrying of both disciplines. I look back on my journey with my leg, and Tibetan medicine wouldn't have saved my leg. I mean, there's no pills that they could have given me that would have helped me to regenerate the amount of damage that was done. It was beyond anything that was not a surgical team to be able to do anything about. And so while my leg was saved, and they did a great job of doing that, the restoration and the regeneration was almost non-existent. It was just, here, take these medicines until you're feeling better. And so that was a very, very different experience that I experienced the flip side of with Tibetan medicine, but also broadened my awareness and understanding of the potentials. And so when you bring the best aspects of modern science together with the best aspects of traditional lineage-based medicine, you really have the best of both worlds. And so I see in the future that these things are going to come together. I think that the way that we treat internal medicine, with pharmaceuticals will change. I think we'll see a large turning towards botanicals and minerals, things that are naturally from the earth rather than synthesized chemicals. And I think that people are going to make that change for themselves, and we're already seeing it. The level of awareness that people have for what they're putting into their bodies and the research they're doing into alternative healing supports, it continues to grow. I talk with people every day that are just experiencing this for the first time and really having their eyes open and moving into a state of openness to experience the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so your belief is that the people will move the needle forward in that sense, because obviously if we leave this in the hands of people who own pharmaceutical companies and all the profits that are made off the back of that, we're probably just going to remain this way until the end of time, right? But like you mentioned, if people are looking into alternative sources of healing and only continuing to go down that direction and more people do it, do you feel like that upturn could happen within our lifetimes, for example? I know that you mentioned obviously we're starting and we're moving in the right direction, but I know that the power of what has known to be existing for, my lifetime at least, your lifetime probably as well, and this completely Western approach. When do you feel that kind of taking a turn for the better in terms of like the winds changing, so to speak?
Yeah, I see a lot more. Just it's very clear that chronic disease is on the rise. People are experiencing more imbalances in their health than ever before, from our environments to pollutants. Things are just getting into such a state where if we're not consciously being aware of and taking care of our mind, our bodies, and our spirits, especially through what we eat, then we're going to have to look for alternative sources of those vitamins, nutrients, minerals, the things our bodies need to live and thrive with. And Eastern medicine has kept that sacred and true for a long time. And so people are, as they look for alternatives and finding Eastern medicine, it's really important that they have, places that they can go that provide the best of what Eastern medicine has to offer. It's just like the pharmaceutical industry. There's lots of people out there that make all kinds of claims about this and that and their practices and where they learned their art. But, our Tibetan physician said to me very seriously one time, he said, "Trinn, please don't try to make any botanical formulations until you've had 12 years of ethnopharmacology training." And I said, "Why is that, Amchila?" Just because I wanted an answer. And he said, "Well, because the intricacies of the biochemistry of the human body with the botanical and mineral kingdoms isn't something you learn overnight." And so, there's a level to pharmacology that can be attained within Eastern medicine that makes it profound and extremely powerful. But unfortunately, that level, it hasn't been reached and maintained by a lot of people who are practicing in the same way. And so helping to educate and bring awareness, and also bringing awareness and education to the practitioners that are using the products, is a big part of what we do, because that increases that knowledge and that wisdom and that access to understanding and information. And I think as people have more access to it and are able to understand things, from the source, but also from different perspectives like this podcast, that their eyes will be opened and that they'll hopefully start to search for answers in alternative areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And you obviously spoken about the miracles in some sense that it's done for you, and obviously all the work that it's helped you achieve over the past, like you said, 5 years. I think was your first encounter with this Tibetan doctor. And essentially what I was thinking is in regards to maybe just someone who wants to optimize their life a little bit more. We look in a lot of the biohacking world, we see a lot of desire for productivity, for weight loss, especially in my world as well. Can it also help with those type of things as well, in terms of productivity, in terms of weight loss? And also, why have the biohacking community not got so onto this? Because they seem to be very, very proactive with finding the latest and greatest and the thing that can help them achieve that next level. So I'm curious to get the take on what it can do for those who maybe aren't unwell, who aren't sick, who just want lifestyle optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. Increasing vitality and general health and well-being is a huge part of Tibetan medicine, staying proactive and ahead of illness and disease. So yes, to give you an example, we have a formula that's called White Elephant, which is a neurocognitive enhancer. We have people who use that have nothing wrong with them. They're just looking for, an extra edge with their work or their study. And that formula will turn a 2 or 4 hour flow state into a 6 or hour flow state. And it'll just tune your mind into whatever you're doing. Your heart and your brain are in coherence. You're getting things done in a meaningful and a productive way. And so that's a formula that a lot of people use just as a daily supplement, but it also has some pretty profound medicinal benefits on top of that, like EMF remediation. And we're not even aware of it a lot of the time, but we're constantly soaking up EMFs. And so having a method of remediating that EMF internally can bring all kinds of benefits to our health. We have formulas that are for increasing consciousness and awareness, things that work within the subtle bodies, as well as the physical body. One formula that is our most popular for what you've described, just general health and support, would be our rose gold diamond shilajit formula. And that really is a super longevity formula. It's made for increasing lifespan. It's made for increasing cellular energy. It's jam-packed with adaptogenic plants and 85 minerals, as well as fulvic and humic acid. What makes that formula really special and unique is we also use nano diamonds from a lab in the United Kingdom, actually, which are now used in different cancer therapies and different conventional medicine therapies. But those really increase the life force energy of the formula and take it into an advanced expression that, as far as we can tell, hasn't been experienced on the planet until we created this formula. It's used by Ayurvedic physicians as well as Chinese medicine doctors and Tibetan physicians, all over the country, as well as general practitioners and naturopaths. It's very, very helpful just for maintaining and continuing with vitality and energy and all of the good things that we need to live our lives the way that we want to on our terms. So those are some things that would definitely help, and we have a lot more. Formulas. We have more than 50 formulas and about 26 Tibetan pill medicines. And we also have Rinchen pill medicines, and Rinchen pills are the epitome of Eastern medicine. They contain different minerals like crystals, toxic element removed precious metals, and these formulas are used for very specialized types of healing, but can also be used by healthy people just to increase vitality on an emotional, spiritual, and a physical level. And to give you an example, we have a Rinchen pill that's for rewiring an ailing nervous system and brain. And so if you've been through any kind of injury where you've damaged nerves, or a traumatic brain injury, or you just feel a disconnect between your brain and your body, then that formula will help to restart those connections, reestablish them, and support you back into health and vitality. If you haven't been ill, then they'll actually increase your levels of vitality and increase the health and the function of your nervous system and brain and the way they work together.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned a little while ago in the conversation that you're not a revolving door business in the sense that you don't want people to come back and have to rely on the products. In that sense, do these ingredients kind of help with the upregulation of the certain things in our bodies that, or even the downregulation, depending on what we're looking for, right, in regards to the nervous system? But do they allow those things to kind of happen on a somewhat consistent and regular basis? So, for example, if I take something that aids as some type of a nootropic and has those abilities to help my flow state go from, like you said, 4 to 6 hours to like 6 to 8 hours, for example, can you expect to see those effects after you finish taking the medicine, or would you have to kind of do it on a continual basis?
Yeah, but you'll notice effects right away. But when you give Tibetan medicine time, that's where the real magic is. If your body is aware that it has support coming on a continuous basis, then it knows it can do the work and start the regenerative and the healing process. And so for most people, whether for an acute issue, usually 30 days of using the products is enough for a healing trajectory to be established and for them to start coming back into balance. For people with chronic and very serious conditions, usually will suggest a 3-month protocol, and that is enough time for most people to, again, establish a healing trajectory and move in a direction where they don't have to continue taking a bunch of supplements or medications to continue having that benefit of health.
No, it's interesting. It's always good to know, and especially if it's something like you said that's not like a lifelong thing that someone needs to take. And at the same time, like even if it was, I feel that many people get put on medications, right? For example, if you're diabetic and that doesn't end up improving, you might be taking insulin for the remainder of your life, or blood pressure medication, or whatever it might be, right? People get accustomed to that,
and that's
right?
very true.
So, yeah. So, I mean, at the same time, if they have to end up taking something that does push them in a positive trajectory for a long time, but it is also good to know that actually, a few months of taking a cycle of course of whatever it might be is going to help push you in the direction that you need to go, and that you might not have to rely on taking that forever, right?
Yeah, that's exactly true. We have athletes that choose to take something every day. We've done some studies and tests that are still ongoing with professional athletes using a combination of the rose gold diamond shilajit I just mentioned, but another formula called White Tiger. White Tiger is used, we actually created it for polyarthritic joints, arthritis that affects more than one joint, bounces around with inflammation, and also made for things like multiple sclerosis and fibromyalgia and all types of degenerative disorders that are related to the nervous system. And so when using White Tiger and Rose Gold Diamond Shilajit, I have a personal trainer as well. He actually looks a lot like you. You remind me of him. But he used these formulas. He used these formulas and put himself through, I can't remember the type of training. It was some type of intense training, and that he was doing with some of his elite athletes that he trained. And I would get messages at 4 o'clock in the morning say, dude, what is in this stuff, man? I just did 6 reps of blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, all right, great. That's good that it's working for you. But he's now become, one of our greatest advocates. He's constantly sharing with his customers and bringing them into an awareness of what we're doing and helping to support their work. You mentioned weight loss earlier, and I just wanted to let you know that we do have a formula for that. It's called Weightless Radiance. And that formula actually is used for diabetics to stop themselves from having to go onto insulin. So when people are pre-diabetic, we'll use this formula, have them take it 30 minutes before meals, and it will maintain their insulin levels so they don't have to get onto insulin. And for people that are diabetic, it's also extremely beneficial for them to take that before meals, and it will help to manage it. We started having a lot of people with diabetes. You mentioned it before, that's why I bring it up, but I let Amchi La know that and said, hey, what can we do for diabetes? And he said, well, we'd have to make one formula for type 1 diabetes and one for type 2. And I said, all right, can we do that? And he said, yes, I'll get to work. And so he's been formulating both of those formulas. And that's kind of how things have developed for us. As we come across customers or practitioners that are struggling to address a certain type of illness or disease, we'll go to the drawing board, and Amchi will put together a formula and we'll address and support that need. And that's really how a large portion of our creations have come into existence.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Like, very, very far off example, but I remember working in gyms in the past where the owner of the gym was a gym goer, right? And they completely understood the needs of the people who went to the gym. Whereas, often when you are within a company where they have no idea what the actual person needs from it, it's almost like they create things based on what they believe, like as it's kind of as general as it can get. Yeah. Whereas you obviously meet the needs of the people.
There's a disconnect there.
Precisely, exactly. They have kind of no idea really what the person who is on the ground, who really, really would utilize your product or your service, whatever it might be, they don't realize what you genuinely need. They do it based off assumptions, based on stats, or based on, just general understanding. So that's what's pretty fantastic, is you kind of meet the need of your customer, because if you're kind of coming from that primary sense of like, well, what do they need, and then deliver off the back of that. So I like that approach as well.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's been wonderful for me is being able to try all of the products that we've created out and use them and just see what the benefit has been. Some of the things I haven't thought I've needed, and I've taken them and used them and realized different benefits from them. And so it's for me as a co-creator of this and I've been doing it from the start. It's wonderful to be able to experience it myself, but then also to watch other people have the same experience with the products. I had been involved in other CBD companies before I started my own, and I noticed the same thing that you're talking about. The people running the company, they're interested in making what will make the most money next, but not so much what will help the most people next. And that was something that really didn't ever sit right with me, and I wanted to be different. And so we've really made sure that we've held to that, and tried to be as for the people as possible, and really make what's needed, rather than what's going to make us a bunch of money.
And I think it shows. I think that you can really tell the difference when you find a company and you can see where they're coming from, right? Where are they coming from in terms of the creation of the products or the service or whatever that might be? I think, like you said, people are looking towards alternative healing, but I think they're also looking towards like authenticity and integrity of companies now, which I think is super, super important. And it's kind of clear to see. And people are going to do their research, right? So they're going to be able to find you out very quickly if that's not your intention. And the one thing I see as potentially a bit of a challenge for your company and the understanding of the awareness of this is a potential, like I spoke to a guy recently, he is very much focused on Kegels and like kind of pelvic floor, well, not Kegels, actually more like pelvic floor exercises for men, right? And they talk about it from a pelvic health perspective. And for me, I said to them transparently on the podcast, I was like, that sounds very boring. But because of the actual the upside of doing that, especially as a healthy man, is obviously increased sexual performance and all these other things that actually seem very, very attractive to a younger man, especially a healthy man or even an unhealthy man who doesn't want to deal with those type of things. And I mentioned that the way he spoke about it seemed very boring compared to the results that people could get if you packaged it up in a little bit more of a sexier and more of a marketable way. Do you think that you potentially have the same issue with what you guys do as well, in the sense that obviously you want to keep the traditions, you want to keep the fundamentals of what you do, but at the same time, for someone on the outside looking in, they don't see something that looks too modern. They see something that maybe they are a little bit intimidated by because they don't understand the culture, so to speak. For example, what you see in modern America or even the UK is not what you're going to see when you dive into your world and your website, for example. It's stuff that people, would expect to see if they walk into, a store that's created around these type of things, but it's not going to be every single store they see around them. So do you think that's a potential challenge, and do you have any plans on how you're going to mitigate that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge challenge from the start. Maintaining the authenticity and honoring the lineage that we represent, is the most important thing to us. We've worked with different business consultants and ad managers and marketing people, and most of them have very different ideas for sharing the products with people than we do, because it's coming from a materialistic standpoint. And that's honestly, you hit the nail on the head. That has been a challenge, but the way that we deal with that is we just try to be as inclusive with our message as possible. This is a lineage that's come from Tibetan Buddhism, but we're not just a company for Buddhist people. We're a company for everybody. And our Amchi actually was when he came to the U.S. and brought Tibetan medicine here, he was charged with adapting those traditional formulations for Asian physiologies into formulations for Western physiologies. And so that's what we've really done with Tibetan Jampha, Tibetan pharmacy, is create a line that not only caters to Asian physiologies, but all physiologies, Western included. And so we take it very, very seriously, trying to be as inclusive as possible, and not have people get trapped in the pitfalls of religion or things that they may not understand that they're seeing on the website. We believe it's very important to be inclusive and just to include everybody and have everybody feel like we're offering a space where we honor all paths to spirituality and all paths to wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been a really good insight into your world, and I think it's probably opened a lot of people's eyes, piqued a lot of curiosity as well. So I want to ask you a final couple of questions, Trinn. And the first is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do?
If the answer to that would be, the impact we want to have is to help people awaken their own innate healing systems. Within each of us is a system of healing, a master healer, an innate awareness of what we need to do to be healthy. And we give that power away, and we listen to other people, and we don't focus on understanding what that really means for us. And, I just want people to understand that that magic lies within. Nothing anybody ever gives you or hands you or you take is going to heal you. Your body is going to heal and regenerate itself. It's just about finding the right supports and tools. Within the botanical and mineral kingdoms is a great place to start, to be able to give your body the added support that it's needed to affect those healing mechanisms and really begin the healing process and support it all the way through. Oftentimes people will ask me, will this cure this or will this cure that? And I give them the same answer. No, your body will do that when it's in a state to be able to heal and regenerate itself. And so, I just want people to know that there are alternatives, that they can be sovereign over their health and make choices that keep them healthy and away from sickness and illness, and that there are systems of healing that still exist in the world that have really mastered, through applied insight, this process, and now share that wisdom and knowledge with us. And Jampha Tibetan Pharmacy is really a beacon for people to find out that information and to begin their wellness journey with their own sovereignty.
Amazing. And where's the best place for people to find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the best place would be at our website, jampha.com, spelled Jampha.com. There's a whole wealth of information there about all of our products. We also have hundreds of blogs, different articles written by our Tibetan physician. If people would like to learn more, we're offering a free consultation as part of this podcast. Just mention Simply Fit Podcast and go to heal.me/Jampha, and that will bring you to a consultation page. Just click the consultation that you'd like and mention the Simply Fit Podcast, and we'll waive the fee for that consultation.
Amazing. We'll make sure that's all in the show notes below. But Trinn, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an insightful conversation.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Thanks for having me.